For anyone who has ever been the overlooked one in the family, this story will hit close to home. She was the daughter they never bragged about, the sister they pitied, the ones they sent to the kitchen while everyone else celebrated success. On Christmas Eve, they even gave her a freezing garage to sleep in, while her sister Esbos enjoyed the guest room. But what they didn't know was that every insult, every comparison, every dismissive smile had been aimed at the wrong person. Because the woman they called a disappointment was secretly one of the most powerful CEOs in America.
My name's Ava, I'm 30, and I'm secretly running a fintech empire worth billions. To my family, I'm the black sheep. They've laughed at my dreams my whole life, making me feel like a total outcast. Tonight, at our annual family dinner, my sister Olivia just smirked as my mom banished me to the freezing attic because her boss was getting the guest room. I could feel my hands start to shake. For 5 years, I've swallowed their condescending remarks and kept my success a complete secret. Little do they know, all of that is about to change. Before I explain how I went from that attic to completely blowing their minds, drop a comment with where you're watching from and subscribe for more stories. I grew up just outside Boston in a family obsessed with the traditional definition of success. My parents, Elizabeth and Robert, had a very specific path to achievement laid out. You know the kind: Ivy League school, secure corporate careers, and a wall full of accolades to prove it. My older sister, Olivia, who's 38, was their prized creation. She checked every single box. She went to Harvard, got her MBA, and landed a senior VP position at a huge investment bank, Summit Financial. Every family dinner was basically the Olivia show, a celebration of her latest victory. My younger brother Ethan, who is 28, just followed right in her footsteps. He's now a rising star at a major law firm and just made partner. My parents were absolutely beaming. And then there was me, the family enigma they could never quite figure out. Since I was 10, I've been fascinated with systems, especially financial markets. While other kids were playing outside, I was building complex trading algorithms. I'd lock myself in my room all weekend, teaching myself to code advanced predictive models. To my parents, this was just some strange obsession. Ava, when are you going to join the debate team? My mom would ask with a sigh. Colleges want to see more than just your little science projects. That chasm between my family and me just widened in high school. While Olivia was captain of the soccer team and student body president, I was launching an investment club out of a dusty, forgotten classroom. My mentors called my strategies revolutionary. My parents just called it a lack of discipline. You're always jumping from one idea to the next. My dad would complain when I'd put aside a stock-picking algorithm to work on a new currency model. Why can't you just focus on one thing, like your sister? They didn't get that I wasn't abandoning projects. I was building on them. Each one gave me a new tool I needed for the next breakthrough. I hoped college would be different. I went to law school mainly to please them, but all my real passion went into my startup. By my second year, I knew I had something massive on my hands, a new type of fintech platform that was already getting buzz from venture capitalists. So, I dropped out to go all in. My family's reaction? You'd think I had just set my diploma on fire. You're flushing your future down the toilet, my father said, his voice dripping with disappointment. We did not raise our daughter to be a quitter. And even if this little project of yours works out, what's the plan? My mother added. There's no security, no benefits, no real career path. Olivia happened to be home that weekend, and she just offered me that smug little smile that I hated so much. It's all right, Mom. Not everyone is cut for the real world. Some people just have to learn the hard way. After that, it never stopped. Every holiday became a showcase of Olivia's latest win versus my latest experiment. She'd pull up in her new Mercedes, host her massive team and year-end bonuses. My parents would brag about her to anyone who would listen, but would change the subject if I came up. Olivia just closed a huge 9-figure deal, my dad would announce. Then if someone asked about me, my mom would say, oh, Ava is figuring things out. The breaking point came at Thanksgiving 3 years ago. I had just closed my first $3 million in seed funding. I was on top of the world. But as I started to share the news, Olivia interrupted to announce she made executive VP. Oh, that's just wonderful, honey, my mother gushed, totally forgetting I had even been speaking. As they all raised a glass to Olivia's career, I knew I was done seeking their approval. From that day forward, I would keep my work entirely to myself. Let them think I was struggling. One day, they would learn the truth, but it would be on my terms. That night, I officially founded Nexus Dynamics. It began as a small operation but soon became a titan of the industry. Within 2 years, we had offices in every major financial hub. By the third year, we were a global force. I was buying out smaller tech companies and pouring every penny back into Nexus, all while remaining a complete ghost. I decided to be an anonymous founder, letting my COO be the public face of the company. It was a smart move to keep our rivals guessing, but the real reason was much more personal. I couldn't bear for my family to know the truth. Living a double life was draining. I owned a stunning penthouse overlooking the harbor, but I told my family I was barely affording rent in a small studio. I'd arrive at family dinners in a dented old sedan, while my collection of luxury cars sat hidden in a private garage. They'd ask me about finding a stable job on the same day I had just chaired a multi-billion-dollar acquisition meeting. Then, 5 years after I left law school, I made the biggest move of my career. We acquired Summit Financial, the very bank where Olivia had built her entire career. The irony was almost suffocating. My perfect, successful older sister was now working for the family failure, and she had absolutely no idea. The signed documents hit my desk a week before the holidays. I just stared at the Summit logo, now sitting right under my own. It had all led to this moment. The very company that represented my sister's entire life was now just another asset on my balance sheet. Should I draft the internal announcement for the Summit team? My executive assistant, Jessica, asked. I shook my head no. Wait until after the new year. Let's let everyone enjoy their holiday. What I didn't say out loud was that I needed one last holiday playing by their rules. One last dinner where I was the family screw-up and they were blissfully unaware. The family group text arrived a few days later. Dinner at 7. Let us know if you can make it. It felt more like a summons than an invitation. I typed back a simple, I'll be there, resisting the urge to just decline. After 5 years, I knew exactly what to expect. It would be the same old story. Hours of listening to Olivia's accomplishments, with parents' thinly veiled disappointment in me, and my brother Ethan's silent endorsement of their judgment. I drove my beat-up old car to their house, despite having my pick of high-end vehicles. That old car was part of my costume, but it was also my shield. It was a reminder that I was no longer playing for their validation. When I arrived, a brand new Maserati was parked in the driveway that I didn't recognize. Inside, everything clicked. Olivia had brought a guest, Mark Dawson, an executive vice president at Summit Financial, her boss, the very man she was always trying so desperately to impress. Ava, you remember Mark, don't you? Olivia asked in a tone that suggested of course I should. We had never met. She was wearing a chic designer dress that probably cost more than my supposed monthly salary. Mark stood beside her in a tailored suit, a Rolex gleaming on his wrist. I don't believe we've had the pleasure, I replied, offering my hand. I had deliberately worn a Fates Not Concert t-shirt and ripped jeans. Ava, you're here, my mom said, waving me over from the kitchen. Come help me with the potatoes. Olivia and Mark are just catching up with your father. And that was it. In less than a minute, I was relegated to kitchen duty while Olivia commanded the spotlight. I peeled potatoes while listening to the smug laughter coming from the living room. So, Mark, how's the corner office treating you? I heard my dad ask. Olivia mentioned you have a clear view of the entire harbor. It's not bad, Robert, but I hear our new anonymous owner has an even better one, Mark replied. My hands froze above the sink. He was right. The view from my office on the top floor of the Nexus Tower was much, much better. You've met this new buyer? My dad inquired. Nobody's met them, Olivia interjected. It's like they're a ghost, just a signature on an email, making these huge decisions from behind the scenes. Their own daughter, I thought, a slight smile on my face. Ava, how's that little finance app of yours coming along? My father yelled out, suddenly remembering I existed. I almost laughed out loud. My little app was the $6 billion firm that had just acquired hers. It's coming along, I replied, keeping my voice even. Olivia came in to refill her wine. Look, I know money's probably tight. A junior analyst position just opened up in one of our smaller divisions. It's grunt work, but it's a start. I could put your name in, she offered. The condescension in her voice was almost unbearable. She had no idea her own performance review would eventually land on my desk. I appreciate the offer, but I'm okay, I said softly. Suit yourself, she shrugged, returning to her admirers. As I served dinner, I overheard my parents whispering in the hallway. At least Ethan's law career is stable, my mother sighed. I just worry about Ava, 30 and still messing with those science projects. Olivia's tried to mentor her, my father chimed in, but you can't help someone who refuses to get a real job. The old jab still stung. My phone vibrated, a secure message from my COO about the Summit Financial deal. Retention offers are drafted. Mark Dawson is on the list per your instructions. A sharp, satisfied smile touched my lips. Leo had no idea his career was in the hands of the woman dicing potatoes across the table. The last straw came before the cake was even served. I went to the hall to take a work call and heard Megan and my mother talking in the guest room. We've put Leo in here, of course, my mother said. Your father and I are in our room. Liam's got his old room, and you have yours. So where does that leave Lila? Megan asked, her voice dripping with fake pity. Well, the study is full of gifts, my mother said. I figured the garage is fine. It's just for one night. Perfect, Megan laughed. The garage is totally her aesthetic. She must be used to slumming it in that little startup of hers. My blood ran cold. A garage in Chicago. In December. No heat. My hands were shaking with rage as I walked back to the kitchen, my face a perfect mask. 5 years of building an empire while they belittled me, and my Christmas gift was a freezing garage. The dining room looked like it was out of a magazine. Crystal glasses sparkled next to china on a lace tablecloth. It was a picture of holiday perfection, right down to the place cards that exiled me to the far end of the table. My mother had put Leo at the head, like some kind of king, with my father at the other end. Megan was on Leo's right, my mother on his left, and Liam sat next to his sister. I was in the corner, by an empty chair, a perfect symbol of my place in this family. To be fair, Leo looked a bit uncomfortable with the whole setup. He kept catching my eye with a questioning glance. So, Lila, he finally asked, what kind of AI development do you do? Before I could even answer, Megan let out a small laugh she tried to cover with a cough. Oh, Lila just plays around with some coding projects, she said, waving her hand dismissively. Nothing on the scale you're used to at Apex. I run a firm that builds advanced AI platforms, I said, looking right at Leo. His expression changed, a spark of genuine interest in his eyes. Really, that's a huge growth area. We're actively looking for companies to partner with in that space. What's your core focus, Leo? Megan interrupted, touching his arm. Don't be a nerd. Tell them about that new Dubai project. And just like that, the spotlight swerved away from me again. I watched Leo hesitate, then pivot at Megan's command, launching into a story about his firm's global expansion. My one chance to connect was over. Dinner continued as it always did. Megan held everyone's attention with tales of her major client wins. My parents listened, absolutely beaming. Liam would chime in with his own legal triumphs, getting the same glowing praise. My attempts to join in were met with a polite pause before the subject was changed. We all knew our roles perfectly. This is phenomenal, Catherine, Leo said, finishing his steak. You're a fantastic cook. Thank you, Leo, my mother replied, looking thrilled. It's just wonderful having everyone home for the holidays. Speaking of, my father cut in, we need to sort out where everyone's sleeping. It's getting pretty late. A tight knot formed in my stomach. Here we go. Leo, we have the guest room all made up for you, my mother announced. Fresh towels and everything. Megan, you're in your old room, naturally, my father added. And Liam is all set. Every eye in the room turned to me, and I saw a flash of guilt on my parents' faces. Lila, my mother started, her voice sounding forced and cheery. We've set you up in the garage. There's a cot and some warm blankets. I saw Megan's lips twist into a smirk while Liam suddenly became very interested in his dessert plate. The garage isn't heated, I stated, my voice completely flat. You can plug in that old space heater my father offered, like it was some genius idea. It'll be fine. Leo looked genuinely shocked. The garage? It has to be freezing out there. Lila won't mind, Megan chirped. She's always been the tough one, right? Sis? Her condescending voice made me want to scream. In that moment, I knew she planned this, bringing Leo home just to see me humiliated. I'm sure we can find another spot, Leo started to say, looking embarrassed. It's okay, I said, my voice dangerously even. I have to work late tonight anyway. After dinner, my mother showed me to the garage to see my luxury suite. It was even worse than I'd pictured. The space was crammed with old patio furniture, a dusty treadmill, and boxes of junk. A cheap camping cot sagged in the middle of the floor. A pile of musty blankets sat next to a tiny, ancient space heater. It's only for a night, my mother repeated, refusing to look at me. And you're always glued to that computer, so it won't even matter. I said nothing as she hurried back to the warmth of the house. The second the door was closed, I sat on the cot and pulled out my phone. The weather app showed 28 degrees. It wasn't much warmer in here. I opened my laptop and saw an urgent message from my board. They needed the final authorization on the Apex Consulting acquisition before the morning bell. At 9 a.m., an email would land in every single inbox, including Megan's and Leo's, announcing Helios Systems as their new owner. It would also name me as CEO. As I looked over the last few pages, a new plan started to form in my mind. Why wait? Why not take control of this narrative right now? My phone's buzzed. It was a text from my assistant, ready to send the executive memo tonight if you give the word. Every director at Apex will get the alert instantly. I glanced at the clock, 8:30 on Christmas Eve. Leo and Megan would both see that notification. Leo's reaction would be something he couldn't possibly fake. My thumb hovered over the reply button. 5 years. 5 years of their casual cruelty. Was I really going to let them stick me in a freezing garage on Christmas Eve? The side door creaked open, and Leo stepped inside, looking guilty. "Hey, sorry to just walk in," he said. "I just wanted to see if you were okay." This is all kinds of wrong. Before I could answer, his phone started vibrating loudly. Then it buzzed again and again, a stream of alerts. He frowned and pulled it out. That's strange. Urgent notifications from the board on Christmas Eve. He opened the first one, and his face went from puzzled to totally floored. "This says Apex has been acquired by Helios Systems," he stammered, his eyes finding mine, effective immediately. But that's not possible. We would have been told. His phone rang, and he picked up instantly. "Leo Vance." "Yes, I'm just getting the emails now." "No, I had no warning. The CEO wants to talk with me tonight, on Christmas Eve?" While he listened, his eyes got wider and he slowly turned to stare at me. He was finally actually seeing me. The pieces were falling into place inside his head. She is right here with me," he whispered into the phone, his voice strained with shock. The garage suddenly felt like the Arctic as Leo stared, phone pressed to his ear. I could just hear my CEO asking if he was with Lila Chen, the CEO of Helios Systems. "I think I am," Leo answered, his eyes locked on me. I held out my hand for his phone. "May I?" He handed it over like he was in a dream. The moment felt unreal, sitting on a broken cot in my parents' cold garage, about to blow up 5 years of their story. "David," I said, my voice crisp and confident, a tone my family had never heard. "Yes, I'm here with Leo. The schedule has changed. Please go ahead with the full board notification tonight. We'll send the company-wide email in the morning." I could almost feel David's confusion through the phone. "Tonight, ma'am? It's Christmas Eve." "I'm aware of the date," I said, watching the blood drain from Leo's face. "The situation has changed. Please proceed now." When I hung up, I gave the phone back to Leo. He took it like it was on fire. "You're the CEO of Helios," he said, more to himself than to me. "You bought Apex." "I did," I said, shutting my laptop. But he motioned vaguely at the room. The garage, the camp cot, the small heater fighting a losing battle with the Chicago winter. Sleeping in the garage at Christmas, I finished for him. Yes. So it would seem. The door to the house burst open, and my sister Megan stood there, her own phone in her hand. Her face was ashen. "Leo, are you seeing these alerts? Something big is going on at the firm. They're saying we've been bought by." Her voice died as she saw the look on Leo's face, then followed his shocked stare to me. "What is happening right now?" "Maybe we should all discuss this inside," I suggested, getting up from the cot. "It's getting a little cold out here." In a daze, Leo and Megan followed me into the house. The warm kitchen was a shock as we walked in on my parents and Liam laughing over some dessert. "All settled in, honey?" my mom asked without looking up. "There's been a slight change of plans," I announced calmly. "We need to talk." My voice must have had an edge, because my mother stopped wiping the counter. Dad looked up from the sink, and my brother Liam froze, a plate in his hand. "What is it?" Dad asked, looking from me to the shocked faces of Megan and Leo. Leo's phone buzzed again, slicing through the tension. He checked the screen, then shot me a confused look. "You should probably get that," I said. "It might be HR with details on your new bonus." His eyes widened, but he answered, putting it on speaker out of habit. "Leo, it's David from the board. Did you see the wire? Helios Systems just bought us. Their CEO is calling an emergency meeting with all VPs first thing tomorrow. I hear she's been a plant inside the company for months. Is that true?" The whole kitchen went dead silent. Every single eye snapped to me. "David, gotta go," Leo mumbled, hanging up the phone. "Maya," Megan started, her voice tight. "What is he talking about? What's happening here?" I looked at them, standing in a kitchen where I had always felt like a ghost. The moment I had both feared and hoped for was finally here. "I'm the founder of Helios Systems," I said, my voice steady. "And this morning, my company acquired Vantage Tech." The silence was so heavy you could almost touch it. My mom's dish sponge dropped to the floor. Dad's mouth just hung open. Liam just stood frozen, a dinner plate still in his hand. Megan finally shattered the silence with a brittle, scornful laugh. "That's impossible. Helios is a monster firm. They're worth billions. Yes, I confirmed. They are." "But you never even finished college," my father managed to say. "You worked at some little startup. That little startup was Helios," I told him. "And we haven't been little for a very long time." "You're lying," Megan snapped, but I saw the first flicker of doubt in her eyes. This has to be some kind of sick joke. I simply pulled out my phone and opened a secure link to the Helios servers. After logging in, I turned the screen to face them, displaying the CEO's command center. "This is our live global operations data," I explained. "Our current market valuation is about $12 billion. We have 8,000 employees worldwide, and that now includes everyone from Vantage Tech." Leo slowly started nodding, his face a mask of dawning comprehension. The new security protocols, the server switch, the shakeup in management. That was all you. Every single thing, I confirmed. But why? My mother finally asked, her voice cracking. Why keep this from us? For all these years, you assumed I was a failure, I cut in. You made that perfectly clear at every opportunity, every holiday, every single phone call. We were just concerned, my father insisted. We wanted you to have a secure life. No, I said, feeling years of anger rise to the surface. You wanted me to be Megan, to live the life you had planned. And when I didn't, you gave up on me. You never once asked what I was building or showed any real interest. That's not fair, Megan interrupted. I tried to help you. I sent you job posts. You sent me ads for receptionist jobs and patronized me like I was a child, I fired back. You brought your vice president to Thanksgiving and made me eat in the den so you could impress him. Leo winced, looking suddenly queasy. I didn't know you were in the den, he said quietly. I never would have allowed that. My mother moved toward me, her expression a mix of awe and what looked like fear. Maya, honey, if we'd known how successful you were, we would have supported you completely. We just want you to be happy. Please, stop, I said, holding up a hand. Don't pretend you'd have treated me differently if you knew I was wealthy. That actually makes this so much worse. The kitchen fell silent again. My phone began buzzing nonstop with notifications as the news broke across both companies. Outside, soft rains started to fall against the window panes. So, what happens now? Liam asked, trying to cut the tension. With Vantage, you know. For most of the employees, nothing changes, I said, glad to be talking business. We are restructuring the senior team, but we're not planning mass layoffs. Megan's face went pale. The unspoken question hung in the air. Am I fired? A few years ago, I might have savored having this kind of power over my sister. But now, the victory felt hollow. No, Megan, you're not out of a job, I said. Your marketing strategies have been effective, despite our personal issues. But starting Monday, you will be reporting to a new director. Relief washed over her face, quickly replaced by a new worry. Is everyone going to find out we're sisters? That's up to you, I replied. I kept my privacy for professional reasons, not just family drama. That's over now, but we'll figure out how to handle the office politics. My dad cleared his throat, trying to merge his image of me with this new person. Where are you living now? He asked suddenly. You always said you had a tiny apartment. I own a penthouse that overlooks the park, I told him, and apartments in London and Tokyo, near our other main offices. My mother collapsed into a kitchen chair, looking completely floored. All this time, we had no idea. That was the point, I admitted. I spent years desperate for your approval. Then I just gave up. I put all my energy into my work instead. Leo's phone buzzed again. He gave me an apologetic look and stepped out of the kitchen. I could hear his tone shift, becoming the decisive VP handling a corporate merger. Megan just stared at me like I was a complete stranger. And in a way, she was right. The box she'd always kept me in the failing little sister had never been real. I should get my bags from the car, I said, breaking the silence. I can get a hotel room. No, my mother cried, jumping to her feet. You can't. It's Christmas Eve. You have to stay here. The raw irony of her desperate plea was almost suffocating. The guest room is all made up, my father added quickly. Leo can take the den. I'm not putting anyone in the den, I said, my voice firm. Not for one night. Leo came back into the kitchen, pocketing his phone. That was the chairman of the board. They're calling an emergency meeting for 7 a.m. tomorrow. He looked at me with a new kind of respect. Your people are efficient, he commented. Efficiency is a cornerstone of Helios Systems, I replied. The entire feeling in the room had shifted. My family suddenly seemed like strangers in their own house. The power dynamic that had defined us for decades was just gone. I need some air, Megan mumbled, heading for the sliding glass door. After a minute, I followed her out. A thin layer of frost was beginning to form on the deck, catching the light from the porch. Megan was gripping the railing, her breath visible in the cold air. Are you actually keeping me on? She asked, not looking at me. Or was that just for show in there? I came up beside her at the railing and said I was serious. I meant every word. You're good at what you do, Megan. Our issues don't change that. She nodded slowly, her eyes on the dark backyard. I've been so awful to you. Yes, I said, you have, and now you work for me. She let out a short, bitter laugh. The irony is just, life has a weird sense of humor, I replied. Finally, she turned to face me. Why did you never say anything? She asked. All those years I bragged about Vantage, and you could have bought the company with spare change. Why let me sound like such an idiot? I considered it for a moment, trying to find the honest answer. At first, it was to protect the company. We were scaling fast and were still vulnerable. After that, it just became the new normal. And maybe I was waiting. Waiting for what? For any of you to really see me, I said. To ask about my life and actually care. Without any knowledge of the money. To be interested in me, not my net worth. Tears welled up in Megan's eyes, which I hadn't seen since we were kids. I don't think I even know how to do that. It was the most honest thing she had ever said to me. I went back inside to get my suitcase from the car, walking past my family, who stood there like statues. When I came back in, Leo was putting on his coat. "I've got a car coming," he said. "I figured I should probably give you all some space tonight." "You don't have to leave," I told him. "I think it's better this way," he replied with a slight smile. "Besides, I've got about 200 emails to get through before that meeting. I hear the new boss is demanding." For the first time all night, a real smile touched my lips. "Is that what you hear? Her reputation is legendary," he said, his voice serious. "But really, what you've built is incredible. That security encryption you developed basically changed the entire industry. I'm actually really excited to see your plans for Vantage." And with that surprisingly genuine compliment, Leo left, leaving me alone with the ruins of my family. The living room was completely quiet. We all sat in our usual spots, but nothing felt right. My parents took their recliners. Liam sat on the sofa arm. Megan was in a corner chair, and I took the small ottoman. We were separated by a chasm much bigger than the space between us. Finally, my dad spoke. "A global tech empire." It was more of a statement than a question, but I nodded. "Yes, and you built it on your own, while we never knew?" My mother's voice trailed off, as if she couldn't finish the thought. "While you thought I was a lost cause, I finished the sentence for her." Chloe looked down at her lap. "Why hide it for so long, Maya? Why didn't you just tell us?" The question was so simple, but the answer was a complicated knot of pride and pain. In the beginning, I had to prove it to myself first. I started to explain. I was so scared of talking about it and then failing miserably. But as Helios grew, I noticed something. "You never asked about my career before. Why would my success change that? What I wanted wasn't praise for making money, but your faith in me." "We always had faith in you," my mother said, but her voice was thin as air. "No," I said, my voice steady and quiet. "You loved an idea of me, not the real one. The daughter who was supposed to be just like Chloe. When I built my own life, you stopped paying attention." My father stared at the floor, suddenly fascinated by the rug. "We were concerned," he mumbled. "That's a parent's job." I told him there's a difference between concern and complete dismissal. "You never asked about my plans or my goals. You just thought I was playing businesswoman." Leo cleared his throat. "You tried to tell us about your first round of funding." Mom interrupted to ask Chloe about her new BMW. My mother's face turned beet red. "I don't remember that." "I do," Chloe whispered. "I remember thinking her little project didn't matter, not compared to my promotion." The confession hung in the air, a stunning weight between us. In all our years of competing, Chloe had never admitted she intentionally belittled me. "So what does Helios Dynamics actually do?" Leo asked, and his curiosity sounded real. "Besides acquiring Summit Corp, I mean." For the first time tonight, a flicker of hope ignited in me. A real question. "We started in advanced cloud security," I said. "My protocols became the industry standard within a couple of years. From there, we moved into data privacy and corporate AI solutions." Leo nodded, taking it in. "So buying Summit was strategic. Their hardware fills out your software platform." "Exactly," I said, impressed he got it so quickly. "And you built all this without a college degree?" my father asked, his voice flat. "I learned what I had to learn," I told him. "And for the rest, I hire experts. That's what a good leader does." My mother abruptly left for the kitchen. She came back with a magazine from a pile of mail. On the cover was a shadowy figure with a headline, "Helios and its Ghost EOS, the city's hidden power player." "This came with the business journal last month," she said, her voice tight. I never connected the dots. I didn't even read it. The irony was suffocating. The proof of my entire career was right here, treated like junk mail. "So, does this mean you're rich?" my dad asked awkwardly. "Yes," I said simply, extremely. Chloe let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "All those times I offered you cash to help you out. You must have thought I was a complete fool." "I wasn't laughing," I told her. "It just hurt. Being your pet project while I was building an empire." "So are you going to fire me?" she asked again, raw fear finally breaking through. "I already said no," I answered softly. "Your job is secure. Your reporting line is just changing, that's all." Relief flooded her face as she nodded. "I don't deserve this." "It's not about deserving it," I said. "It's business. You're great at what you do, and our family drama doesn't change that." My father leaned forward. "I don't know what to say, Amelia. We were wrong, just completely and totally wrong about you." It was the closest I'd ever get to an apology from him. "I hid things," I admitted. "That's on me." "But we gave you a reason," my mother said softly. "We made you feel like you couldn't share your success with your own family." Another heavy silence filled the room. "You can't fix years of dysfunction in one night, no matter how truthful." "So what now?" Leo finally asked, always practical. The question hung in the air. How do you rebuild a family that was based on a lie? How do you move forward when your entire history just changed? I don't know, I confessed. This wasn't my plan. I'm still trying to process this myself. Will you stay here tonight? My mother asked, her voice filled with desperate hope. Not in the garage. The guest room is all set up. The idea of sleeping here, with all these raw feelings in the air, felt overwhelming. But leaving on the night before Thanksgiving felt wrong too. I'll stay, I said, but I need to make some work calls. My executive team knows, and they'll have questions. My father nodded, and I saw real respect in his eyes for the first time ever. Of course. You've got a company to manage. That simple sentence, something I'd wanted forever, felt unexpectedly good. As I got my laptop, Chloe stood up. Let me help you get your stuff for the guest room, she offered, a tentative olive branch. We went to the garage in a heavy silence. The place felt even colder now, the insult of that cot stinging more than ever. I'm sorry about this, sis, Chloe said, pointing to it. It was my idea. You thought it'd be a good joke to make me sleep in a cold garage on Thanksgiving Eve? I asked, looking right at her. She actually looked ashamed. It sounds awful when you put it that way. Because it was awful, I said. Billionaire or not, it was just a mean thing to do to family. She nodded. I've spent so long seeing you as competition, not my sister. I don't know how to turn it off. Maybe that's where we start, I said, grabbing my bag, by stopping the competition, by just being sisters. Walking back inside, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Leo. Car's here. I'm heading out. Board's on board and fully behind you. Happy Thanksgiving, boss. I couldn't help but smile at the small win. The acquisition was going off without a hitch. Inside, my mother had prepared the guest room with clean sheets, her own quiet apology. My father had a fire going, trying to chase the chill from a house that had felt freezing just a few hours before. Lying in a real bed that night, not a garage cot, I went over the day's insane chaos. A 5-year double life, completely shattered in a few hours. 5 years of keeping my family at a distance, all gone because of a truth I never wanted to share. Tomorrow would be madness, the official announcement to all Summit employees. The press release with my name as CEO, endless media calls. But right now, in the quiet, I felt something surprising. Relief. The burden of my secret was finally lifted. Whatever happens now, I'll face it as myself. I could hear Chloe across the hall on a call, her voice low, probably doing damage control with her team at Summit. I could hear my parents whispering in their room, likely trying to understand the stranger I'd become. We were still broken, but for the first time in forever, we were looking at the same shattered pieces together. It wasn't forgiveness or understanding. Not yet, but it was a beginning. Thanksgiving morning was thick with a tense quiet. I got up early, a force of habit, and found my dad in the kitchen, staring into his coffee. Happy Thanksgiving, I said. He jumped. Happy Thanksgiving, Amelia. Can I get some coffee? He poured me a cup like I was a client, not his daughter. Sleep okay, better than the garage, I said with a little bite. He actually flinched. About that, it was wrong. I didn't realize how cold it gets in there. It wasn't much of an apology, but it was all I was getting, so I nodded. I have calls to make before people wake up, I told him, checking my phone. The memo goes out to all Summit employees at 9. Of course, he said, then asked, should I leave you to it? His question just proved how much of a stranger I was. No, it's fine. I work from everywhere. He watched fascinated as I set up my laptop on the old kitchen table. As I handled emails and approved the press release, I could feel him watching, really seeing me work for the first time. By 8:30, everyone was in the kitchen. Mom was making a huge breakfast, trying too hard. Chloe kept glancing at her phone, and Leo just watched the tense, quiet drama unfold. Should we do gifts now or after we eat? My mom asked, desperate for normalcy. After, I said, shutting my laptop. The clock just hit 9. The announcement just went out. Right on cue, an alert buzzed on Chloe's phone. She read the screen, her face a blank mask, then her eyes met mine. It's official, she said. Helios Dynamics has acquired Summit Corp. Founder and CEO Amelia Vance will speak to staff after the holiday. My parents just stared at each other as the truth landed. Vance, my father whispered, you're Amelia Vance. Of course I am, I told him. Whatever's happened, I'm still one of you. I thought I saw something shift in his eyes, maybe a hint of pride. Breakfast was a minefield of carefully chosen words. We were all tiptoeing around years of resentment, trying to find our footing again. Then we moved to the Christmas tree, and the contrast was just brutal. The gifts laid it all bare. There were the usual perfect presents for Sophie and Mark, and then the obligatory, impersonal ones for me. A bland scarf, a cheap bath set, a popular book I'd never open. But they weren't prepared for the pile of gifts. I'd brought the ones I almost left in the rental car, when I considered just checking into a hotel instead. Each gift was wrapped in simple, tasteful paper, holding things I'd chosen for them months before. You brought presents? My mother asked, her shock just a little too loud. Of course, I said. It's Christmas. I started handing them out. For my father, a rare, signed first edition from his favorite historian. For my mother, a handmade ceramic vase from a local potter she'd mentioned loving once. For Mark, a vintage drafting table he'd been hunting for but would never buy for himself. And for Sophie, a framed, original photograph from a small gallery in Paris she fell in love with on a trip last year. The absolute astonishment on their faces was everything. It was the clearest possible proof that even when they had stopped seeing my life, I had never stopped watching theirs. "How did you know about this vase?" my mother whispered, her fingers tracing its smooth glaze. "I think I pointed out the artist's work once, years ago. I listen," I said simply. I was always paying attention. My father cleared his throat, genuinely moved by the book. This must have been incredibly difficult to track down. "Not difficult," I replied. "It just took a little work." Sophie just stared at the photograph. "You remembered Paris." "You talked about that gallery for a month after you got back," I reminded her. "You said you'd never seen light captured like that." They shot awkward glances at each other, the gap between their generic gifts and my personal ones screaming silently. "Well, we have one more thing for you," my mother announced suddenly, rushing to her room. She came back holding a small, poorly wrapped box. "We got this morning. Your father ran out to the 24-hour drugstore while you were on your calls." Inside was a cheap silver frame. It held a blurry printout of the tech blog article about Aura, the one they'd completely ignored. "We thought you could sign it," my dad said, looking at his feet. "Since you're the mystery founder everyone's talking about." It was a clumsy attempt, but it was the first time they ever actually acknowledged my work. I took it from him, managing a faint smile. "Thank you." As the morning unfolded, the mood in the room genuinely began to shift. My parents started asking me about Aura Innovations. First with hesitation, then with real fascination as I explained how I built it from scratch. My brother Mark started asking smart questions about my expansion strategy. Even Sophie, once I reassured her that her role was safe, began to engage with actual curiosity. "So all those holidays you were glued to your phone, you were secretly running a billion-dollar company?" Mark asked, his mind blown. "Pretty much," I said. "Last Easter, I was closing a huge deal with an investor while you guys thought I was just rudely checking emails." "Is that why you always ducked out of family dinners early?" my mother asked. "Because you had to work." I took a deep breath, picking my words. The work was a huge part of it, yes. But it was also because being here was really hard for me. "Because of how we acted," my father said, his bluntness surprising me. "Yes," I admitted. "It's tough to sit at a table for hours feeling like the family failure." A thick silence fell over the room. My mother dabbed her eyes. "I pulled out some old photo albums," she said abruptly, grabbing one from the shelf. "From when you were in that engineering club in high school." She flipped to a photo of a teenage me with a few other nerds, proudly holding a trophy we'd won at a state robotics competition. A competition my parents had skipped. "You won first place," she murmured, her finger tracing the prize in the faded picture. "I remember now. We couldn't go because Mark had a swim meet that same day." "It's fine," I said automatically, so used to my achievements being ignored it no longer even hurt. "No, it's not fine," my father interrupted. "We should have been there. One of us should have been there for you." Sophie leaned over Mom's shoulder to see. "I had no idea you did all that. I guess I was just in my own little world." "You were encouraged to be," I replied with no anger. "We all just played the roles we were given." The talk continued right through lunch, slowly untangling years of miscommunication. There were no dramatic apologies or big tearful hugs. It was just a quiet, dawning recognition of the parts we'd all been forced to play. Later that afternoon, my phone vibrated. A text from my head of marketing. "The acquisition announcement is live. Your inbox is blowing up with congrats and interview requests. The team is managing it all. Everything's going according to plan." I showed the phone to Sophie, who was visibly stressed about the takeover. "It's going to be okay," I promised her. "The integration team will do all the heavy lifting. Your day-to-day job won't change that much. Except now as my little sister is my new boss," she replied with a wry smile. It was the first honest smile I'd seen from her in what felt like forever. "Well, there is that," I admitted. That evening, we all gathered for dinner, which was so much more relaxed than the stuffy meal the night before. The conversation actually moved, free from all the old secrets and grudges. My father asked about Aura Innovations and what we were planning next. My mother, about my life in Austin. Mark was curious about how I managed my team. And Sophie, amazingly, told stories about Pinnacle Analytics, asking for my opinion and finally closing the distance between our two worlds. She confessed that launching their new security software was a total marketing failure, We just couldn't get the average person to care why they needed it. That's a classic mistake in our industry, I agreed. You get stuck selling the features instead of the feeling. At Aura, we design everything backward. We start with what the user needs to feel safe, smart, connected, and then build the tech to deliver that feeling. That's brilliant, she said, and for the first time, I could hear genuine professional respect in her voice. For a moment, I saw what we could have been all along allies, not just rivals. And I knew it wasn't too late to build that. Later, as we were drinking coffee in the living room, my father finally asked the question that had been hanging in the air. Why did you hide all this from us, Clara? I understand the business side of it, staying private, but why from your own family? This was the real issue. The question under everything that had been said since the big reveal. I had to see if you could love me for me, not for what I accomplished, I said honestly. I wanted you to value me for my character, my passion, my mind, not for my net worth or my job title. And we failed, my mother whispered. Yes, I said. Until yesterday you did. So what now? Mark asked. Where do we go from here? I looked at each of their faces, so familiar yet totally changed by this new truth between us. Now we start again, I said, not by erasing the past, but by choosing not to let it control our future. As Christmas Day ended, I realized something. The huge reveal of my success hadn't delivered the satisfying I told you so moment I'd fantasized about. It gave us something quieter, and much better, a real chance to reconnect. We weren't magically fixed. There were still years of hurt and bad habits to undo. But for the first time since I was just a kid with a wild idea no one believed in, I felt like they finally saw me. Not completely, not perfectly, but for real. It was a start. 6 months after that life-altering Christmas, I stood on the patio of my house on the lake, watching my family drive up for a summer barbecue. The change in our whole relationship was clear in how they walked toward my home. No more awkwardness, no more walking on eggshells around me. My mom gave me a warm hug, a total world away from the stiff greetings of the past. This place is incredible, Clara. You have to give me the full tour this time. My dad followed, carrying a nice bottle of bourbon and a tech magazine. You're on the cover again. Thought we'd add it to the shrine. Since Christmas, my parents had set aside a shelf in their home office for articles and awards about my work. Their pride was finally on display, not just saved for Sophie and Mark. Our weekly video calls had become a real habit. They weren't just chores to check off a list, but actual conversations. My parents now loved bragging about their genius CEO daughter to their friends, sometimes getting the details about my latest projects hilariously wrong. Sophie arrived last, looking calmer than I had ever seen her. The acquisition had been a rocky start, but she'd finally hit her stride in the new company structure. Our work lives and family lives were starting to overlap, and somehow it made both of them better. The design team is obsessed with the new campaign ideas, Jessica said, while we chopped vegetables. We'd never cooked together like this before. The focus groups are reacting exactly like you said they would. Your pitch to the investors last month was brilliant, I told her. It was so smart, so confident, and your numbers were rock solid. She just beamed at the praise. I had a great teacher. Mark walked in, laptop open. Got a minute? I'm sketching out an idea for a sustainable fashion brand and wanted your opinion on the business plan. That was something new. It all started after Christmas, when Mark asked me for career advice, sparking this massive new ambition in him. I'd kind of become his unofficial mentor, and we were suddenly bonding over business plans and marketing strategies. Sitting around the patio table, I couldn't help but think how much had changed in just 6 months. It wasn't just that we were mixing business with family. It was deeper, like we were finally seeing the people we had all become. I've been thinking, my dad said as we finished our meal, about what you said back at Christmas, about wanting to be recognized for who you are, not just for what you achieve. I nodded, the memory of that raw conversation rushing back. I realized that's what I've always wanted too, he confessed. My entire identity was wrapped up in my job, in being successful. And I pushed that same pressure on all of you, especially you, Sarah, because you were the only one who ever really fought back. It was probably the most honest thing my father had ever said to me. I think we were all caught in that same cycle, Jessica added, tying our self-worth to our accomplishments. I was so terrified of not being the perfect daughter that I couldn't be happy for anybody else, she admitted, looking right at me, especially not for you. Because you built your own success, your own way, and on some level, that just made me feel like I had failed. As the conversation settled into the evening air, I realized how much I had changed, too. The weight of my secret ambitions had been crushing me for years. Being honest with my family didn't just heal us, it healed me. I stopped needing them to validate me. And ironically, that S when they finally did. I built my own walls, but I left the gate unlocked, and that vulnerability became a new kind of strength. Professionally, the ripple effect was huge. Revealing myself as the founder of Aura Creative created a ton of media buzz, but in the end, it made our story that much stronger. My own family drama inspired us to create new company policies on mental health days and non-traditional career paths. I also started mentoring young creatives from overlooked communities, especially women whose ideas deserved a real shot. That felt better than landing any client. Best of all, Jessica and I had become this incredible team. Her killer marketing instincts were the perfect complement to my creative vision. We'd finally gone from being competitors to collaborators. "Remember the garage?" my mom asked, pulling me from my thoughts. That question used to make my blood boil, but this time I just smiled. It's a little hard to forget. "We turned it into a proper home office for you," my dad announced, beaming with pride. "For whenever you come to visit, we put in new windows, good lighting, a huge desk that looks out over the backyard." The message was crystal clear and it was filled with love. The place that was once my exile was now their open invitation for me to come back. "That's so nice," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "That's really, really nice." That night, everything felt right. I thought about how far we'd come as a family and the journey still ahead. We weren't perfect, not by a long shot. We'd probably fall back into old patterns and hurt each other by accident. But we were trying, we were growing, and we were finally being honest. Last Christmas was the moment everything shattered. It stripped away all our defenses and made us look at each other, really look. It was painful, yes, but it was necessary. It cleared the way for something new to grow. I learned that real success isn't about your accomplishments, it's about your connections. It takes guts to be vulnerable, to knock down your own walls. The real prize isn't what you build, but who you become along the way. As my family packed up to leave, already making plans for our next dinner, I felt a kind of peace that no career achievement had ever given me. That cold, dusty garage where I used to hide feels like a story about someone else, replaced by the warmth of knowing I belong. Have you ever felt like you had to hide a part of yourself from the people you love? What do you think would happen if they finally discovered your secret passion? I would love to hear your own stories down in the comments. And if this story connected with you, please give it a like and subscribe, and share it with anyone who needs to be reminded that the people who doubt you the most are often the ones who need to see you fly.